Good morning. My name is Rob Crauderueff of Crauderueff Solar, and I'll be presenting with colleagues from Oya Solar and Christopher Community about an easy way to help your budget in New York community solar programs. If nothing else, we can say that we are in interesting times right now, and those interesting times are presenting many organizations with budget challenges, let it be municipalities, schools, nonprofits, or businesses. Then everybody is at least looking twice at their operating expenses and frequently are trying to figure out how to meet some meaningful budget cuts. We are happy to be the bearers of some good news today, however, to talk about community solar, what it is, how it works, and how there's a fairly easy and quite accessible way to reduce electric expenses. We have a great panel to educate everybody participating with respect to community solar. Manish Nair, founder and CEO of Oya Solar, myself of Crauderueff Solar, we're consultants to Oya. Doug Riker, who's president of Christopher Community, and Fred Zolna, consultants of Christopher Community. We'll be addressing three main areas in our conversation today. We will begin by talking about many of the barriers to solar, especially challenges to on-site and self-finance solar. Then we'll talk about community solar in terms of what it is, its mechanics, and how community solar delivers savings to property owners. And we will conclude with a case study of Christopher Community, an affordable housing organization that is subscribing more than 30 properties to community solar. And they've gone through a whole process of considering whether they should build solar on site or go forward with community solar. So we'll really get an in-depth discussion about, from a property owner's perspective, why community solar can be a good fit. So Manish, would you like to start by giving a quick intro on Oya?
Sure. Thanks, Rob, and welcome to everyone on the webinar. It's really great to have you all here with us talking about this great opportunity. Oya Solar will be celebrating its 11th year in business next month. We are a developer of community solar projects across the Northeast and the Midwest United States. We currently have over 100 projects in development or in operation, and our current pipeline of community solar projects exceeds 1,000 megawatts across the country.
Thank you. So Crauderueff Solar, we are a New York state-based company, and we use creative financing and project aggregation to help property owners access solar and leverage the value of solar where it may not otherwise be accessible. We have more than 60 projects operational in development across the state, and a pipeline of more than 10 megawatts of solar.
And I'm Doug Riker, president of Christopher Community, and we've been around, well, it'll be 50 years next year. We've managed, develop, manage, and build affordable senior and family housing across upstate New York. We have projects from Rome and Utica in the east, all the way out to Buffalo in the west, up to Watertown north, and down to Elmira in the south. And our buildings range in size anywhere from 1 and 2 family houses to 140 unit high-rise buildings. So we have all sorts of flavors.
Thank you. Manish, you want to jump in and a little more about Oya?
Sorry, I was having a little problem with the mute button. Just to give everyone a flavor of some of our current projects in our portfolio in New York State. We have a number of projects here exceeding probably about 100 megawatts statewide. We are present in most utility territories across the state. Many of these projects will begin construction in the coming 6 to 12 months, and we expect these projects to be fully operational starting in 2021 and through the end of 2022. We've currently completed about 67 megawatts of projects in New York State, and the 100 or so megawatts here represents about 2/3 of our portfolio, of our current portfolio the state.
Thank you. And Doug, you want to jump in about CCI?
Sure. As we indicated, we've been doing this for a long time. We have several components in our business. Property management is our primary thrust of our business. So we're managing over 3,000 units of housing. We also develop lots of projects from the concept phase all the way up through construction and opening and leasing them. And then we also run the Section 8, traditionally known as the Section 8 program, the Housing Choice Voucher, for most of Onondaga County. We have over 1,000 people involved in that. And so that we see all sorts of aspects of the rental housing world in the affordable arena.
Great, thank you. So to jump in about solar, and while we want to talk about what can be done with respect to solar, it's important also to talk about the barriers, especially to on-site solar in most of upstate New York. So one of the big challenges, of course, is upfront cost and property owner needing to identify the capital, let it be equity or debt, to put into a project. There's also a lack of tax appetite for many property owners. Certainly governments, schools, nonprofits typically don't have any tax appetite. And even for-profit businesses may not be able to fully or efficiently utilize the federal tax credits that can cover 26% of the project cost. Then there's solar expertise, in-house capacity to manage a project and to effectively procure a solar project, in addition to addressing any on-site construction needs. Then once the system is built, also making sure that the system is operating and maintained as it should be to provide the expected results. And lastly, for property owners or others with a mission-based focus, there's no opportunity to extend benefits beyond the property itself. For example, for a housing organization that would like to be able to extend benefits to their tenants.
And I'll chat a little bit about how community solar actually works. The great thing about community solar is it really addresses many of the barriers that Rob has just outlined. Community solar allows us to build a larger solar project, ideally sited both for permitting with the local stakeholders involved, but also with the utility. We are then able to allocate shares of the power produced from that solar system to multiple subscribers of that power. And that's allocated according to each subscriber's annual usage. And there's really 3 simple steps in understanding how this works. So one, as I mentioned, we generate the power at the site and create bill credits, and the value of those credits are determined in New York State by the VEDR value stack, which is a simple structure made up of 5 components, which calculates the price of that credit in any given utility territory and site location. The next step is that the subscriber will receive bill credits. Now, this doesn't change your utility bill. You continue to still receive power from your utility company and you still pay your utility bill. However, you will see an additional VEDR bill credit on your monthly bill once you are a subscriber to a fully operational project that represents your subscription. And that credit is based on the amount of electricity that that particular subscriber is subscribed to from our project. And as an example, if your monthly energy costs are $1,000 and we've all done our job correctly, you should receive bill credits in a pretty much similar percentage, which would show that your bill would net to $0. The third step is really that you get to keep 10% of those bill credits that are provided to you from subscribing to the power from our community solar project. So you'll now receive a bill for 90% of those meter bill credits, and you'll continue to retain the 10% of the subscription savings. We use that money to fund the construction and ongoing operation and maintenance of the solar plant for a 25+ year period. And so when all the math is said and done, you should save $100, or in this example, $100 or 10% of your meter bill credit. And why does this make more sense than a typical rooftop solar installation? So in addition to some of the barriers that Rob's already mentioned, obviously in this instance, we're committing to the capital outlay for the project, and so the subscriber is not expected to provide any capital to support the project at any time through the subscription life. And that, of course, stands in contrast to a typical solar project. Also, the savings that we're providing you, the 10% savings on your meter bill credit, is a guaranteed savings. The meter bill credit itself may fluctuate up or down a little bit month to month or year over year, but your savings of that credit are locked in. This is different than in rooftop solar, where you're net metering your system, and really your savings depend on your production in any given month and all of your operation and maintenance costs, and you're really taking that risk to ensure that you're generating those savings versus this scenario in which your savings are guaranteed. Also, in community solar, there's no on-site installation or construction, no need to manage traffic, pull permits with the city, block off roads, etc. Also, no disruption to your business at all, or to your organization or your tenants, depending on what type of business you operate. And so that can really have a meaningful impact. It's a very stress-free way to enable more solar in your community, but still get the savings attached to enabling that renewable energy. There's some ancillary benefits as well. It creates more value for your utility company, because now 100% of your power is going to the grid, and it allows the utility to plan better long-term, and hopefully that means enabling more clean energy and more savings, for the community. And in some cases, we're able to add storage as a final incremental benefit, and that increases the overall benefit for everyone, because we're able now to time when we deploy that energy onto the grid and take advantage of higher pricing. And typically that higher pricing is during peak demand times in the summer and in the afternoon, but we then get to pass more of that savings on to you, the subscriber.
So to build on what Manish was saying, there are two main opportunities here. One is for the economic savings. There's automatic savings that are a discount off of electric bills. And this savings not only is short-term, but it's a long-term benefit, right? Over typically 25 or more years. So it's a long-term opportunity to reduce operating expenses in a very reliable way. The second opportunity is to have a broader impact in terms of having a cleaner energy source, and more of a mission-based opportunity to mitigate the impacts of climate change, and even with projects that are near the area, to be able to show that one is vested in a local project that has clear environmental benefit. These benefits are not just, we're about to hear from Christopher Community in terms of their decision-making process and how they wound up deciding to move forward with community solar. What's important is for those of you who are involved in other sectors, then the process, the decision-making process in terms of how to procure energy and how to consider what the benefits are very consistent. Let it be for a government entity or a school or a private business. So I hope that as we turn the keys over to Doug and Christopher Community, that you're able to learn in terms of how this could apply to your own properties. Doug, do you want to, Fred, do you want to jump in?
This is for me. Rob, can you hear me? Oh,
yes.
I unmute. Okay, I see you on the screen. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Fred Zola, and I've been working with Christopher Community on this solar project for a couple of years now, having worked for them as a development person prior to that. I think in effect, we're here as a case study for all of the things that Rob and Manish have talked about previously in terms of the barriers and benefits of going with community solar. I mean, frankly, you started on this out of concern for climate change and looking at ways to have some impact on the environmental problems, but also realizing at the same time that Christopher Community could only get involved with solar if it enhanced their mission to provide affordable housing to low and moderate income tenants. So obviously we're looking for something that was cost effective and savings, and ultimately we found that in community solar. So we really started out looking at the possibility of doing rooftop solar on any one or more of the 50 roofs that Christopher Community has control of as a management company and through ownership. So we engaged local engineering firm to look at the roofs and found that some of them were oriented appropriately for solar and some of them weren't. There were concerns about whether the condition of all the roofs were amenable to installing solar panels or whether we needed to put in a new roof before doing that. Of course, the expenses there would be something that could be absorbed into the project. We looked at what legal structure might be needed in order to take advantage of tax credits, which as a nonprofit Christopher Community cannot do. We talked with possible financing agencies, and each one of those requirements, things that we would have had to solve in order to do rooftop solar, just became, insurmountable obstacles to Christopher Community accessing the solar. We also had some conversations with the utility company about whether we could physically do it, and they were not helpful, and they were not, and we have no experience really negotiating or working with utilities and their regulatory structure. So that was certainly a challenge. We also realized that in order to do construction on any of the Christopher Community buildings, Christopher Community would need approvals from a whole slew of other agencies, the regulatory agencies, the housing companies, probably the mortgagees, and even the limited partners in some of the housing projects. So all of these become, problems with rooftop installations. So we found with community solar that there are economies of scale. The regulatory environment was more clear once New York State's community solar regs and the Vader pricing structure became clearer. It seemed the rooftops, the community solar just seemed more predictable than what we could come up with on sort of trying to price a rooftop system. And also the fact that we didn't have to do construction, as Manish just mentioned. So Christopher Community came to the conclusion that community solar was the way to go rather than rooftop solar. I think we can move on to the next slide, Rob. So then Christopher Community came to the point of seeking out a solar developer to partner with to do community solar. And we had 3 different solar developers with whom we communicated and asked a lot of questions and explored what the options were for community solar. And Doug and I talked about all these issues extensively. I mean, I gathered data on these issues that are on this slide. I mean, obviously, we were comparing costs between 3 different possible community solar providers. We asked each one of them to kind of look at the Christopher Community properties and see which ones were good candidates for being involved in the community solar project based on their billing and their the structure of their financing. We looked at the size of the solar developer that we were talking to and experience, whether they could include tenant meters or not. We considered the location and the experience of these potential developers in our area and in New York State. And site control was a very big issue. The question being whether the developers, had good site control, actually had actual, projects in the works that Christopher Community could tap into. So we think we'll move to the next slide, Rob. For Doug.
Okay. And so, as Fred indicated, we sort of said, are we going to go rooftop or are we going to go community solar? We came to the conclusion the community solar made more sense on a high level. We'd actually had some experience with rooftop. A number of years ago, there was a grant that came through NYSERDA, and we quickly applied and we were awarded a rooftop solar for 5 buildings. Turns out one of them we couldn't put it on because there was a rooftop issue with standing water. And so, this sort of was in my mind when Fred came to me and said, hey, why don't we consider expanding this benefit to many of the buildings that we have? And said, okay, well, how are we going to do this? And talking with my facilities people, they were concerned about putting stuff on the roof. What are we going to do if we have a leak? What happens if something happens to it? How do we redo the roofs? Do we want to own this in any way or have any involvement in the hardware side? We're a real estate management company. We're not an engineering firm or an energy firm, so it made no sense for us to really get into that. So this was a simple way to do it. In essence, if I were to come up with a description, this is like, okay, we had another utility company that came to us that said, hey, we want to sell you solar power rather than something that's produced by water or nuclear or gas fired. And you want to buy it, and there's an arrangement we can reduce your electrical costs, and it's simply a matter of really doing paperwork. And so this made a lot of sense to me from a practical management point of view. The fact and then also the fact that OYA was well established in New York State. They knew their way through the local municipalities to get these things cited. We understand that because we're all over New York State trying to put buildings in and dealing with different municipalities. And the citing process of any structure is always a challenge, and they clearly had that. And also the potential that we could down the road maybe have potentially the tenants involved in community solar and individually. Right now, it's only going to be the utilities for the buildings themselves, but it was worth it to us, and we saw that as it made a lot of sense.
So to summarize the benefits to Christopher Community, starting at a high level, and then to lift off the hood a little bit. Doug, do you want to talk about how at a high level this really was a decision you wanted to make, and then we can.
Right. each of our, as many of you may know in the real estate world, the individual buildings are individually owned and operated. We manage them, and we have some management involvement and ownership involvement in many of them. So we were dealing with different boards, and obviously we're government funded, and we got government subsidies in various ways. So money's very tight. And when we, especially nowadays with this pandemic and the budget impact, so we saw an opportunity that we could say, utility costs, we could get a 10% reduction in our electric costs. You know, it was really a pretty easy thing for us to look at, and you can see the overall benefits. I know our size of important on an annual basis, but over a 25-year period, we'll be able to save over $1 million. It's nice to be able to say that, and all we're going to do is simply just pay a bill to someone else in the end after doing some paperwork. And who wants to, it doesn't get much easier than that.
And to build off of how we arrive at that $1 million savings is, well, starting off at a high level, and then we'll provide a couple example projects. The total bill credit value, which is sized for Christopher Community's annual electric costs, is averaging $428,790 over the life of the project, with an average annual savings of $42,879 a year. Over 25 years, this comes to $1,071,975. So the top area here shows really what's most relevant to Christopher Community. But as my 10th grade science teacher told me, always show your work or you don't get any credit. So we'll lift up the hood a little bit and tell you how we arrived at these numbers. There's the annual bill credit value. And we'll walk through two different examples, so you have a sense of how different projects in different geographic regions can work. This first site is demand meter. The second will be mass market. What this means, a demand meter building is essentially a more energy intensive building, and utilities classify them differently. One project, this project here is in NYSEG territory. The other project is in National Grid territory. And the projects are also of different sizes. But what you'll find, what I'll show you, is that it looks and feels the same from the customer perspective. Here we have an annual bill credit value, again sized for the previous 12 months of electric bills, of $30,330. The annual OIA bill is 90% of that, or $27,297, with an annual savings of $3,033 over 25 years. Simply multiply it by 25, and total savings at $75,825. Right. So that's what, as a property owner, you really need to know. And to go into the details, this project here is in Franklin County. Again, it's located in NYSEG territory. It's a 6.8 megawatt DC project, so it's a large scale system in a field. An operation date up and running, and Christopher Community will start saving money Q1 of next year. Now, to what we do is we say, well, how much total value is a project going to create, and what percent of that total value needs to be allocated to this particular site through a subscription agreement to make sure that that $30,330 is the bill credit value for the Stryker Home Apartments project. In this case, when you run the numbers, we look at the annual electricity generated by the system, which is just over 9.9 million kilowatt hours a year. The value of the value stack, the value of the energy that's injected into the grid, NYSEG compensates that at just over 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Right? And when we run the numbers, then we realize that this particular site needs an allocation of 3.03% of this particular solar project to arrive at the appropriate annual bill credit value, again, of $30,330. That 3.03% is codified through these subscription agreements. So these are formal numbers and calculations that we run on the back end to make sure that the property owner, the Christopher community in this case, gets what you need. A second example, mass market project. This one's in national grid territory. Again, it looks and feels the same from the perspective of the subscriber or property owner. In this case, an annual bill credit value of $21,062. The OIA bill is 90% of that, $18,956, with an annual savings of $2,106. Multiply that by 52,600. By 25, you get $52,650. Again, running through, this project's in Jefferson County, 7.5 megawatt DC size of the project. This project too will be up and running Q1 of 2021. We look at, again, the total value of the project, the 11+ million kilowatt hours a year generated by the project. In this case, 11 cents per kilowatt hour compensated by National Grid based on the value stack calculations. We run the numbers, and this project receives a 1.67% allocation of the solar project. So to conclude, zoom out for a minute. There are significant savings for property owners with community solar. The process that Christopher Community went and the benefits will look and feel, give or take, the same. Let it be a government entity, a school, a business, or another housing entity. These significant savings can be arrived, as Doug was saying, with a relatively simple agreement. And finally, as I was saying, all property ownership types can benefit. So in this case, we learned from Christopher Community, it's a real opportunity as projects are being built and operational to subscribe to projects, no matter what the property owner type, and realize these benefits. So at this, I'd like to open it up to questions, and we look forward to hearing from you.
We did have one question come in during the presentation. I'll just read the question. It looks like National Grid's meter credit is on their file statement number 32. That statement, effective May of this year, is about 2 cents a kilowatt hour. So at 10%, that would net to 0.2 penny kilowatt hour credit to the customer. Is that correct? I'm not sure about that specific statement, but in National Grid territory, the bill credit can range between 9 and 11 cents. So the typical savings you would see would be approximately 1 cent a kilowatt hour. And we would project that rate to continue to grow between 1 and 3%, depending where we are in the state.
Another common question, Manish, is around how a community solar agreement relates to an ESCO agreement. And I know I believe in the case of Christopher Community, you all working with an ESCO, right? So
yes.
Actually, Doug, would you like to jump in and talk about how the process worked on your end?
Well, it's pretty simple. I mean, the escrow agreements are still in place, and then even the building, some of the buildings that we have, the existing rooftop solar, are still also can benefit from this. It's just another source of development. And really, the process was relatively simple. We gave Rob and his group and OIA access to our utilities, so they had access. They could go in and they could look at our utility consumption, and they could get the 24-month study or whatever they needed to look at what it was. They could project forwards what it was. And we, made sure we had buildings that were, decent size, so there's enough electricity to make it worth the effort. We have about almost 35 of these are going to be involved. And then, after they, came forth with a proposal and gave us the credit that we're going to get, they put together a subscription agreement, which was a couple pages. As I indicated, each of our buildings is managed by a board of directors, a not-for-profit board. So we'll take that subscription agreement to the board. We'll ask them to, do a board resolution to just authorize us to enter into that agreement, because it is a long-term agreement. Most daily operations we do without board approval, but this was a 25-year agreement. And that's it. Then we wait for them to build the site and plug it in. So it can be relatively simple and smooth. It took us a long time to get there because we were trying to figure out what the best way was, and also rules and regulations in New York State were evolving. But now that we've gotten there, we're going to do this again when we have some more buildings to involve.
Great, glad to hear that, Doug. Manish, do you have anything to add? And did another question come in?
There are a couple more questions. I would just add that any existing escrow relationship and your meter bill credit are mutually exclusive, so you don't have to change anything about your existing escrow procurement. The meter bill credit is an additional credit, separate and different from any of your daily energy procurement. So I can, a question came in, could you please review again how the credit system works and what we see on our bill? So maybe it's helpful, Rob, if we just went back to that slide. But it may be helpful if we were to change your monthly energy cost to, let's say, $2,000 to be a little more illustrative. But if your monthly bill for the month of June was $2,000 and we subscribed you for the equivalent of $1,000 worth of bill credits, which if we use our, as I mentioned earlier, a 10-cent per kilowatt hour bill credit, this would be equivalent to, let's say, 10,000 kilowatt hours of bill credits. You'll receive your existing utility bill. You'll have an additional line item on your bill, which will show 10,000 kilowatt hours times 10 cents per kilowatt hour of bill credit. And you will have a credit on your bill of $1,000. So $2,000 minus $1,000, you have a utility bill payable to National Grid for $1,000. Separate from that, you will then receive a bill from OIA for those 10,000 kilowatt hours. And our bill will be for 9 cents a kilowatt hour, or 10% less than the total credit set that you received on your National Grid bill. You would remit 9 cents times 10,000 kilowatt hours to us, or $900, and you would retain the $100 of bill credit. So your net bill in that scenario, you would have started at $2,000. You would have received $1,000 in bill credits. You would owe us 900 of that, and so your net bill to the your net savings would be $100, and that would be the monthly savings. I hope I answered that.
So basically, to recap, we would get two bills. We're going to get a bill from our regular utility company with the credit on it, and then a bill from OIA for the discounted, the utility cost, the electricity cost minus our discount. So we would pay the total of $1,900 for $2,000 worth of electricity on a monthly basis.
That's correct, and much better than I tried to explain it.
Well, from our point of view, when we're writing the checks, we want to know who we're writing the checks to, and someone going to send us money, or we're actually just going to get a reduction in cost, because that's a question that comes up when we're trying to present this to our boards. And no, we're not going to get a check back from anybody, but we're just going to spend less than what it would be, what the bill will show. We're just going to have a credit on there. So,
and to talk.
So you can't really put that in the bank, but you also know that you can budget that discount. You know what your utilities are going to be in the coming years.
That's correct.
Yeah. And to build off of what Doug was saying of who gets paid, then right now there are two separate bills, right? One from the utility and a separate bill that is generated from OIA. However, the utilities are in the process of setting up what's called consolidated billing, where all the payments will flow directly through your local utility. And that will make life a lot easier for everybody around. That's expected to be up and running in the next 6 to 12 months. So as these projects are coming online in the next, in Q1 of next year and throughout 2021, then we expect maybe there's a period of a couple months when a separate bill needs to be provided, but ultimately the billing system will be simplified directly through the utility.
Right. One additional question. What percentage of the installed solar capacity is actually generated? A couple central New York community solar average under 10% due to our cloudy conditions, due to the Lake Ontario lake effect. I think the way to think about it is that 1 megawatt of electricity, 1 megawatt of capacity in our solar plants will produce approximately 1,500 megawatt hours of electricity. And that's on an annual basis. We would expect 2/3 of that electricity in the summer, in the warmer 6 months of the year, and 1/3 of that electricity through the winter months. Please, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to ask in the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen.
Any last questions? Doug, do you have any last words you'd like to leave with us?
Well, I would be glad to talk to anybody if they wish to reach out to me, just to, one-on-one describe our experience. We're not hooked up yet, but we're going to be soon by Q1 of next year. And meanwhile, we're getting our subscription agreements put into place. But anybody should feel free if they want to know what to do. But in the end, for our experience with, having done some rooftop and having contemplated doing more, this is just a much easier lift. We can stay in our wheelhouse and not have to go into the utility business. And it makes a whole lot of sense. We have enough complexities. We don't need to add more.
I would just add that, we think that this is a really great, community solar is really great in building stakeholder and community engagement in communities, as I think can be referenced here. I mean, it's just great that Christopher community tenants can actually see and touch, well, maybe not touch, but see the impact, and that the jobs that are created are local jobs, they're meaningful jobs, and they're long-term jobs as well. So it's I think there's a lot of positive feedback, throughout the community as we build more of these plants throughout the state.
Well, at that, then we'd like to thank everybody for participating. We're happy to be a resource in moving forward.
Sorry, Rob. We have one more.
Oh, great.
One more question.
Okay. Please jump in.
Can you elaborate on the community solar, not rooftop slide?
That would be
the one, yeah. Sure. So I think the first and foremost, the process of community solar really puts all of the risk on us as the developer and owner in terms of permitting, financing, construction, utility, interconnection, and it really de-risks the rooftop solar owner. We've got the internal staff to ensure that these projects get built correctly, and then really we're passing the savings both of the lower construction cost because we're building more optimally sited and larger projects. We're able to pass those savings on to you, the subscribers, regardless of the sector that you're in or whether you're a large demand user or a small commercial user, and guarantee those savings to you for 25 years. When you look at rooftop solar, if you have to net meter that system, not only do you have to take care of that system, ensure that it's operating, respond quickly to downtime related to a broken solar panel or vandalism or bird droppings or simply a utility outage. And those problems can exacerbate over time. And your savings and your return on your capital are directly related to your ability to effectively, monitor and stay on top of that system's production. Obviously, the other big benefit here is that there's no real on-site related construction issues. Craning, lifting, blocking off access to your building, traffic management, coordinating with local municipality, dealing with contractors, etc. The day-to-day things that can really suck up time and divert focus away from your core business, whatever that may be. We take all that risk on. And then the two ancillary benefits, really, we're able to add storage. New York State has done a very great job of basically creating a market signal to us as solar developers, telling us this is how we want to incentivize storage, and this is where the value is. And so we're able to add storage to certain solar projects, not all. And what that allows us to do is inject power at the times which may or may not be different from when we're producing the power. We can store that power and inject it back onto the grid at a time that's higher value. And so that then correspondingly, the credit would be higher and your 10% savings would then also would also be higher. And then of course, all of this really allows the utility to plan better what their network resources are going to be over time. And theoretically, we hope and we believe that grid reliability will improve, upgrades of utility equipment should reduce because we're really taking on a more active role on the grid and greening the actual electricity that's being delivered, not only to the grid, but to our subscribers as well.
Right.
And just, if I wanted to add to that, just from a practical point of view, in our case, we had different ownership and government entities that were involved in it. If we were going to do major structural changes to the building like this, that could involve potentially having to get permission from investors or owners or government agencies. Even the permitting process to put something on a roof like this, dealing with individual municipalities, villages, and towns, could be daunting too, and it's something just to keep in mind. Lots of other things seem to be going this way. If you look at computer software, Microsoft have moved this way, so we all do Microsoft Office through 365. We don't own and install software on individual computers as much as we did. It's now available. We have the latest and greatest, and the professionals are maintaining it for us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it made sense for us, and it's certainly worth considering.
It's quickly worth noting for those of you who are tuning in from the New York City area that the economics of New York City are distinct from upstate. And so we can have a separate conversation offline about there's a rooftop community solar opportunity there that can work quite well. But when we're talking about National Grid Territory NYSEG, then the economics really don't work out on the rooftop. And these larger scale offsite systems are an easy and very efficient way to go.
We have one more question, or two more questions actually. First, the simple one, do we have any projects in Maine? The answer is maybe. there's an upcoming procurement in Maine. We do have some development sites in Maine, but we are not sure if we would be awarded one of those projects at the moment. I think we would hear in the fall, but would be happy to chat more about Maine. Please feel free to reach out to me directly on that. And then one last question here. What are the major issues impacting the ability to install storage? Could give quite a broad answer. I think that there generally the biggest issue in impacting that would impact our ability to install storage when we are talking about outside New York City and in the rest of the state. Really, it's a function of pricing and specifically of local grid issues and the ability for the utility to work with our ability to inject power not at peak times of the day. And so it's more of there's, I guess, two issues. One is economic, really the price of power. And then the second is working with the utility to get them comfortable that we can inject our power even when there's not a lot of demand in that particular geography at that time. And that's more of a technical issue related to protections and controls and interfacing with the utility. I hope I answered your question. If I didn't, please feel free to ask the follow-up there, or we can take it offline as well.
Any additional questions? All right. Manish, go ahead.
No, we're good. We'll follow up later on the storage.
Okay.
I think that's it for questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. It's been a great conversation. We really hope to keep this conversation live with everybody who's participated. So feel free to reach out to any of us who participated on this webinar, and have a wonderful afternoon. We'll be in touch. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.